Listen carefully for a moment. Right now, there are only 3 weeks left, 3 weeks until January 1st. And for millions of people who depend on Social Security, retirees, SSDI recipients, SSI households, that date is not just another page on the calendar. It's a line between how things work now and how they will work going forward. What's unsettling is this: most people have no idea anything is changing. The checks are still arriving. The deposits still show up. The system looks calm on the surface, but underneath, the rules are shifting quietly. No big press conference, no bold letters saying, "Warning," no headline that explains the full picture. And that's exactly why this matters so much. Because January 1st is not just about cost of living adjustments or routine updates like we're used to hearing every year. This time it's different. This time it's about how benefits are handled, reviewed, and protected once the new year begins. And once that clock hits midnight, there's no rewind button. If you rely on Social Security in any form, retirement, SSDI, SSI, survivor benefits, this affects you. Maybe not in a dramatic, obvious way on day one, but in ways that show up later, in calculations, in eligibility decisions, in how income is treated, in how relief or stimulus-related support is counted. Here's the part that makes people uneasy when they finally realize it. Most Americans assume January 1st just means numbers go up a little. A COLA adjustment, a slightly bigger check, business as usual. But that assumption is where people get caught off guard, because while payments may continue, the rules around them change first, and those rules decide what happens next: who stays protected, who faces extra scrutiny, who benefits quietly, and who doesn't realize something shifted until it's already locked in. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break this down clearly. No panic, no hype. Just the truth, explained simply. You'll know what's changing, what's not changing, and what you should be paying attention to in these final 3 weeks. Because what happens after January 1st will surprise a lot of people. Now, to understand why this deadline matters so much, you need to know what's actually happening behind the scenes right now. Here's what's actually happening, and this is where things start to make sense. January 1st is not the day Social Security announces changes. It's the day new rules officially turn on. Behind the scenes, the Social Security Administration updates internal thresholds, enforcement standards, and calculation rules at the start of the year. That's when policies move from on paper to active. And this year, several of those updates are happening at the same time. That combination is what makes this January different. First, let's be very clear about what this is not. This is not Social Security ending. This is not checks being cut off overnight. This is not a surprise benefit cut for everyone. Your January payment does not suddenly disappear on January 1st. But, and this is important, the way benefits are evaluated, reviewed, and protected changes once the new year starts. One of the biggest shifts involves how income and benefit interactions are handled. That includes earned income, unearned income, side work, pensions, and yes, even certain forms of relief or stimulus-related support. The numbers that determine eligibility and payment accuracy reset on January 1st. For someone receiving SSI, that can mean new income limits and new scrutiny. For SSDI recipients, it can affect how work activity is reviewed. For retirees, it can impact how combined income is treated for certain rules and protections. Here's a simple example. Let's say you receive a monthly benefit and you're close to an income threshold. In December, everything is fine. You're compliant, no issues. But on January 1st, that threshold moves. Even a small shift can change how your situation is categorized. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the rule itself changed. Another thing most people don't realize is that January 1st also activates updated compliance standards. That means how SSA looks at documentation, reporting, and verification. The system becomes stricter, not louder. Fewer explanations, shorter notices, more automated decisions. And that's why people often don't realize something has changed until later, sometimes months later, when a letter shows up that's hard to reverse. Now, let's talk briefly about the stimulus connection, because this is where confusion really takes over. Any stimulus, relief credit, or government support tied to income rules does not exist in a vacuum. How it's counted, excluded, or reviewed depends on the rules active at the time, and those rules change on January 1st. Many people assume stimulus money is always separate from Social Security. That's not always true, especially going into a new year with updated thresholds and review standards. This doesn't mean stimulus help is bad. It means the timing and classification matter more than people realize. And once January 1st passes, those classifications are locked in. Now, here's where this becomes personal. Because depending on who you are and how close you are to certain limits, this change quietly works in your favor or creates challenges you don't see coming. And that brings us to the most important question. Who actually benefits from this shift, and who needs to be careful? This is where the impact becomes very real, because this January 1st change does not hit everyone the same way. For some people, it actually works in their favor, quietly, without much notice. If your income is well below the limits, if your benefits are straightforward, if you don't have side earnings, pensions, or multiple benefit sources, for those individuals, the new rules may bring more stability, fewer disruptions, and smoother processing going forward. In some cases, eligibility becomes clearer, reviews become less frequent, and benefit protections stay intact. But for others, this is where caution matters. If you are close to income thresholds, if you receive more than one type of benefit, if you work part-time while on SSDI, or if you expect stimulus-related relief in the new year, this is where small changes can create big surprises. Here's an example. Imagine an SSI household receiving a modest monthly benefit. They're right near the income limit. Every dollar matters. In the old year, a certain type of assistance may not have pushed them over the edge. But under the new January 1st rules, the way that same assistance is reviewed can change. Not the amount, the classification. And classification is what determines eligibility. For SSDI recipients, the concern often shows up differently. Many people assume that as long as they stay under a certain work amount, everything is fine. But January 1st updates can affect how work activity is evaluated over time, not just month to month. A pattern that didn't raise flags before can suddenly trigger a review later, not because of a mistake, but because the standard shifted. Now let's talk directly about the stimulus side of this, because this is where the most misunderstandings happen. There's a belief that stimulus money is always invisible to Social Security, that it never counts, that it never matters. That belief is outdated. Some forms of relief are excluded. Some are time-limited. Some are counted differently depending on when they're received and how they're reported. January 1st is the reset point for how those distinctions are applied. That's why two people can receive the same help and have very different outcomes. One stays protected, the other gets a notice months later asking questions. And here's the hardest part. Most people don't realize how this affected them until after the fact. When a letter arrives, when a review starts, when an overpayment warning shows up, and by then, fixing it is harder. Not impossible, but harder. That's why awareness right now is so important. Not fear, not panic, just understanding. Because once you know where you stand, you can protect yourself. Which brings us to the most practical part of this entire conversation. What should you actually be doing in these final 3 weeks before January 1st? So here's what really matters in these final 3 weeks. Not panic, not rushing into changes you don't understand, but paying attention. Right now is the time to be aware of what's coming before the rules officially switch on January 1st. The first thing to watch for is communication. That includes letters, online account notices, messages that feel shorter or more generic than usual. Even small wording changes matter, because they often reflect a bigger rule change behind the scenes. If you haven't checked your Social Security account recently, now is the moment to do that. Not because something is wrong, but because knowing where you stand gives you control. The next thing to think about is income. Any changes, side work, relief payments, or assistance you expect going into the new year should be understood, not guessed. You don't need to fear them. You just need to know how they're classified once January 1st arrives. That single detail makes all the difference. This is also the time to keep records. Nothing complicated, nothing overwhelming, just clear documentation so that if questions come later, you're prepared instead of stressed. And here's the reassurance part, because this is important. Social Security is not disappearing on January 1st. Your benefits are not suddenly unsafe. Most people will continue receiving their payments just like before. But the people who feel the most confident in the months ahead will be the ones who understood the shift early. Knowledge reduces anxiety. Clarity prevents surprises. That's why updates like this matter. Not to scare you, but to protect you. And remember, if something does change later, it doesn't mean you did something wrong. It often just means the rule changed quietly. You're not alone in this. Millions of people are navigating the same system, the same updates, and the same uncertainty. Staying informed is your strongest protection. So if this helped you understand what's coming, make sure you stay connected, stay informed, and keep asking questions, because January 1st doesn't have to be scary, as long as you know what's ahead.